Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're talking about the 10 most expensive cards from Shadow of the Galaxy. I usually don't talk about the financial part of the game, but in this case, I feel like how expensive cards are going to be, of course, is very tightly linked to how playable the card is going to be at a competitive level and how often people are going to be running it. And I thought this was going to be a fun way to kind of talk about some of the cards that I expect to see the most play in the game. And it's also, I think, a very useful information if you're heading to a pre-release and you want to know what are the most valuable cards. Then, if you happen to open them in a pack, you know that you shouldn't be trading them for nothing, and or maybe you should hold on to them because obviously in a pre-release, most cards have not hit the market yet, so you don't know how expensive they are and it can be easy to trade those cards for nothing. So I felt like this was going to be useful information. This is why I'm going into it. What does usually make a card expensive? Obviously, are often the card sees play at a competitive level. Not only is how powerful the card is, but also is it the card that people are running as a 3 of? Is it going to card that people are running as a 2 of? How many different decks can possibly run that card? And also, is there a budget alternative for this card? So some cards can be very expensive, but because they are competing with other cards, sometimes this can lead to the cards to be maybe not as in high demand because there is a very good budget alternative to the card. The second factor that makes a card very expensive is obviously how rare the card is. So if it's obviously a legendary, it is about 6 times more rare than just a regular rare. So that's obviously has a huge impact on prices. Very niche legendary cards can often be more expensive than rare cards that don't see any play. And so that's another factor to obviously take into account. And also there's kind of it is a Star Wars game after all, so people are going to be valuing certain characters more than others, especially collectors. There are also certain archetypes, like kind of fun decks, that I think can bring up the value. For example, in set one, I felt like the Spectre rare cards, even though the Spectre deck was not very playable and not very competitive, certain Spectre rare cards like Shopper, for example, had a decent price tag, just because people like to play those theme deck. And I expect the same with the Wookiees in set 2. I don't think there's enough support for Wookiees for Wookiee to really be a playable archetype out of Shadow of the Galaxy at least. Maybe later on, but not quite right away. But I'm expecting that most of the Wookiee cards are going to be valued because they are quite uh, people are going to be running to run Wookiee decks just for fun. So that's another factor to take into account. For the purpose of this list, I'm not talking, of course, about the showcases or the hyperspace, the foils. So the showcases are obviously going to be the most expensive card of the set. This is kind of, you don't need a video to know that. It's just pretty normal. Also, I don't expect. I'm not going to talk about the hyperspace and the foils. Obviously, the hyperspace version of a card is always going to be significantly more expensive. Foils are just a couple of dollars, couple of euros above their regular version. They're not so valuable. But you already know this, so it's like kind of pointless to talk about it. I'm just going to talk about the card themselves, what I think are going to be the most expensive of them. Also, I want to say that overall, I expect Shadow of the Galaxy to be a significantly cheaper set to collect for players that are wanting. If you all you're interested in just collecting the cards for competitive play, I think this set is going to be significantly cheaper. First of all, this deck has provided a lot of alternative to very expensive cards. For example, now there's loads of options that you can run instead of a Boba Fett Disintegrator. There's also a lot of options you can run instead of Darth Vader. Darth Vader is not. Now you can play Darth Maul as an alternative to Darth Vader, which is a rare. So there's a lot of alternative to existing cards at lower rarity, which I think is going to make certain deck a lot cheaper. And another factor is the fact that overall I think like the legendaries in this set are significantly more situational and weaker than the one of Spark of Rebellion, which means that in order to be playing competitively, you're not going to need to pick up a playset of almost every single legendaries in the set. There's a lot of legendaries that you're going to be able to skip. So that's also gonna help. So that's gonna help a lot. So I think this set is really the most powerful cards of the set are either uncommon or rare, which really is gonna help making the set a lot easier to collect. With that being said, of course, there's still gonna be some cards that are gonna be very valuable, and we're gonna jump into this with our number 11. Or number 10, sorry. The number 10, I decided to put Supreme Leader Snoke. So three things that makes this card, I think, potentially quite valuable. The first one, of course, is the fact that it's a legendary. So that it's by itself is going to make it quite expensive. It's a kind of a very recognizable character. Not sure how much impact it's going to be, but the second factor is that it's a card that I expect to see quite a bit of play, especially in the sideboard of a lot of control decks are going to be likely to. I think in control, this card is very strong. So I'm expecting it to be on the same kind of level as Avenger in a sense that I don't think it's going to be as expensive as Avenger because Avenger was really a 3 of main deck that's basically that was very important for the archetype. For Supreme Leader Snoke, I expect to be definitely a significantly cheaper than Avenger because I don't think people are going to be running as a 3 of and it's going to be a sideboard card. So I don't think it's going to be as expensive, but it's going to be in the same kind of run in the same kind of decks. And I think it's a fairly powerful card in full control decks. Also, I think Avenger was kind of good in all kind of mid, control mid range and hard control decks, while Supreme Leader Snoke, I see this card more as a hard control card. But yeah, a card that I expect to be quite expensive. On my number 9, there is Dr. Evazan. So this card is only a rare, but I think it's going to see a lot of play. I think one of the big weakness of black yellow in general is the one drops, are the one drops. And Dr. Evazan is definitely a one drop that I think is basically the strong one drop that Cunning Villainy was looking for. It's very difficult to deal with. Yes, there are certain decks that can easily kill it and untap 12 resources, but I'm very high on this card. I think it's very strong because there's obviously a lot of decks that can't one-shot it. If you have a deck that if you're playing as blue-black, then I think it's not a good idea to play it. You might as well just resource it. But against anything else, it's incredibly strong. Obviously, the strategy with this card is to try to attack the base as often as possible, so you basically keep your shield and force the opponent to mobilize a lot of resources to be able to kill him. And if they try to mobilize resources, you can play either McClunky or New Adventures to reset the shield and basically put the opponent, prevent your opponent from being able to collect the bounty. It's just, it's not only about the fact that it's a very solid 2-drop, it's also the fact that it has a lot of powerful synergies with cards that you want to run in that kind of deck anyways. And it is really the strong turn 1 play that Cunning Villainy was looking for. I expected to see play in most of the super competitive deck, and it's a rare. So it's not a legendary, but I expected to see so much play that I think it's going to be quite valuable. Moving on, we got the Dark Saber. So not a card that I think is going to be quite situational, but it's because it basically ignores aspect penalty. It's only a single green. Even though it might be quite situational, and I don't think it's going to be a 3 of, I think it's going to be played as a 1 or a 2 of in decks. It's going to see play in a lot of decks. I think the Mandalorian decks, whether the Gar Saxon decks are going to running it. The Sabine deck are also very likely to run like 1 or 2 copies. It's the kind of card that it's situational, but in the right situation, it can win you the game, play this on your leader, and deal tons of damage. It can be very, very powerful. So it's a card that I think is going to be so it's a legendary, as I said. It's not going to see play as a 3 of, but it's going to see play in so many different decks that I think it's going to be enough to make this card quite valuable, and it's a legendary. So moving on, we got Evacuate. I think this card is likely to see play in a lot of like late game focused slash control yellow decks. We'll see how much of an impact it makes, but I think this card is quite good, and it's a legendary again. So it is quite situation. I don't think so many decks are gonna be able to run it, but there's a significant amount that will, and the impact in this case, it's a single aspect requirement for the card, which widens the amount of decks that can possibly run that. Um, so I think this card is going to be quite valuable just on that basis alone, and the fact that it's a legendary, of course. So yeah, very powerful card, a legendary. So I think it's going to be quite expensive. Next we got DJ. This card is going to be quite valuable because it is a 3/5 for 3. It has very good stat plus a smuggle ability that can be quite strong. I mean, it is a smuggle that you can use, and literally you can use this on the turn before Super Laser Blast happens, and you can literally delay the Super Laser Blast of your opponent one turn. I think that's quite strong, so I think it's likely to see. Maybe it's going to see some play in double yellow. Double yellow Boba probably prefers Boba Disintegrator over this card, but if you're playing both, or if you play this in the sideboard, this could definitely be a thing. I think in the sideboard this could see play in double cunning Yola, but really the strength of this card is the fact that it's literally a single cunning aspect requirement, meaning that you can also run it in heroism double cunning decks, which I think are likely to be a thing in this new set. Not only that, it also has a couple of great things going for it. Is the fact that it is basically a 3/5 with upside, so even if you're not playing double cunning, I think this card is likely to see play as well. And once again, it's a legendary, so that's going to be quite expensive. Moving on, we got Wrecker. Wrecker, in my opinion, is one of the best card in the game, in the set, and if not, basically the best rare in the set. And it's only a rare, but it's going to see play in so many different decks that I think it's likely to become very valuable. Basically, what makes this card so strong is a very good stat, 7/6 for 6 resources. Overwhelm is by itself just very solid. We were talking about the same stat line as an ATST. An ATST would be 6/7 for 6. This one is 7/6 for 6, which is even slightly better. And also, obviously, an amazing when playability that comes into play. You can defeat a resource to deal something 5 damage to something in its ground is very powerful when playability, and then obviously it gets better as you get overwhelmed. So basically, it's even ignoring the ability, it's basically a better version of ATST, and it has a when playability that is incredibly powerful. You can basically ECL Wrecker and one shot a leader and then defeat a resource, kill another unit. That is just so incredibly impactful. I think if there's going to be a deck that can challenge the Boba Yellow, it's going to be on the back of this card. It's going to be on the back of this card. Basically, one-shotting Boba Fett and killing another unit alongside it. It's just going to be super powerful. So I think this card is incredible. So yeah, having to defeat one of your own resources is kind of a bummer, but the card is strong enough that I think it's going to be fine. So it's a very strong card. So once again, it's only a rare, but it's going to see so much play. I anticipate it's going to be very valuable. Moving on, we got Bazine. So I said Wrecker is probably one of the best rare in the game, but I think Bazine is likely to see even more play. I think Bazine is going to be an auto include in all yellow-black decks, either in the main deck or in the sideboard. And that means that she's going to see up a lot of play because yellow-black is going to be, in my opinion, the color combination of the set. Whether you're playing hard controls or you're playing mid-range yellow-black or even like more like aggro tempo with Boba Yellow, Bazin is going to be absolutely everywhere. Her ability to disrupt your opponent's hands for such a cheap cost, leaving a body behind and being able to be smuggled as well is just incredible. Very versatile, and obviously a great card against control. It's not great against aggro, it's not great against everything, but it doesn't need to be. So I think Bazine is going to see. It's not so much that the card is. I think Wrecker maybe is more of a powerful card, but I think Bazine is going to see more play, and that's why I think it's going to be slightly more expensive. It's only a rare once again, but it's going to see so much play that I think it's going to be quite valuable. Next we got Poe Damron. So Poe Damron is not going to see as much play as Bazine or Wrecker, but it is a legendary, so by definition it's going to be a lot more expensive. The body is really good, 6/6 for 5. it doesn't have immediate impact on the game unless you're running it with ECL, and then you can use the on attack ability. The on-attack ability also is very heavy on cards, so you need to have some sort of ways to draw cards if you're running this card, because otherwise you're just going to empty your hand, and the value you're going to get from your card is not going to be as high as if you were playing those cards. But if you have ways to draw a card and you have some cards to discard, then the card becomes incredible. It can one-shot enemy leaders, can defeat upgrades, it can discard opponent hands, and you can do all three effects at once if you're discarding 3 cards, and the body you leave behind is incredible. So, and the card is relatively cheap. So I think the Poe Damron is likely to replace Steadfast Battalion in most of the Sabine deck, because you can ECL and one-shot the leader without even having Sabine in play, which is a big upside. Yes, you have to discard your card, and then you're leaving behind a bigger body as well. So um, it also has certain versatility, be able to defeat upgrade and all that. So I think it's going to see a lot of play. Obviously, the deck that plays Wrecker, especially the one that plays Wrecker ECL, are also likely to play Poe as well. So I don't think Poe is not as powerful as Wrecker, but because it's legendary, it's going to see a lot of play. So a card to watch out for. On my number 2, I have Kylo TIE Silencer. So once again, maybe not as flashy as the card we talked about previously, but it is a legendary, and this card really fills a specific need for villainy that we didn't have before. It's like villainy was very susceptible to be overrun in space in the early stages of the game, because there's no way we have to run card like Consortium Star Viper to be able to kind of contest the space arena, or even like 7th Fleet Defender and all this. And often we have to use ECL to make that work, to be able to kill an A-Wing before it gets to swing you. With Kylo TIE Sensor, contesting the space arena, at least in the context of an aggression, a villainy deck is going to be a lot easier, because we have a unit that can kill an A-Wing, that can kill most of the 2-drops that the Rebel usually field, and without having to sacrifice our turn 2 play, we just play this as a turn 1 play, and then we can contest the space arena. So I think this card really feel a specific need for villainy deck to contest the space arena early on, that I think is going to be very useful. The second thing I like about this card is obviously the fact that it's going to be a great asset for aggressive villainy decks. We saw some Kylo Ren aggro deck, very all-in Kylo aggro deck, which have potential, and I think Kylo TIE Silencer is a big asset in this deck. The ability is fairly situational. I mean, in a Kylo deck, it's a big upside. In other deck, it's kind of like a small little added bonus, but just a 3-2 in space by itself is just very good. But here, the fact that you get to have this additional interaction with Kylo is very good. So I think that honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if pretty much every black-red deck moving forward runs TIE Silencer, and this by itself justify that the card is going to be very expensive as a legendary, because it's once again it's a card that does something. There's nothing that is a 2-drop in space that does the same thing. So it's simply just the best turn 1 play in space for villainy by quite a long shot, and that's going to be a big deal. So the big question now is how much play red-black decks are going to see. If black-red decks are very popular, TIE Silencer is going to be super expensive. If black-red decks are not so expensive, are not so common, TIE Silencer might not be so expensive. We'll see how it goes, but the fact that this card is almost an auto include in all black-red deck is a big deal. There is a budget alternative for the card with the mercenary space shift, which is a 3-2 as well, but it has a big downside of your opponent being able to steal it for 4 resources throughout the game, so that's not ideal. Kylo Tensor does not have a downside; it has an upside as a matter of fact, which is a kind of a big deal. So yeah, so let's go into now our number 1. I think the most is going to be the most expensive card in Shadows of the Galaxy. Pretty much the Darth Vader of the new set, and this card is going to be Krayt Dragon. So this card is going to be very expensive for multiple reasons. So first of all, the fact that it's a single red aspect requirement, meaning that it can be run in any red deck that is a bit that ramps. So and even the deck that don't ramp, as long as you're a late game focused deck, I think Krayt Dragon is going to find a spot into your deck, whether it's going to be in the main deck or in the sideboard. Krayt Dragon, in my opinion, is the strongest late game card in the game. The body, the 10-10 overwhelm is absolutely insane, and the fact that it deals absurd amount of damage every time you play a card is just makes this card very difficult to deal with, and if you deal with it, it's going to be super painful. So obviously there are counters to this card, but it is nonetheless an extremely powerful asset. And the fact that it's a single red requirement means that it's going to be able to be played in a wide variety of decks. So all the Vaders, the Vader greens, the Palpatine reds, the any deck that ramps and is playing red is going to be wanting to play that card, and there's quite a few of those in the set. So obviously it's a meta call, right? How those decks going to be super good? Uh, Time will tell, but I think at least at first, a lot of people are going to be wanting to play that card. Heroism deck, also one of the big thing as well is that one of the main problem with Heroism is that Heroism did not have access to a lot of powerful late game asset. Pretty much the best late game card you could hope for was going to be something along the lines of a Home One or a Reinforcement Walker, but nothing that goes beyond cost 8. And now that we have access to Spark of Hope, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for heroism decks to ramp, and they needed to have some sort of big stuff to ramp into. And as I said, I don't think Reinforcement Walker and and Home One was going to be enough. Krayt Dragon is really the big card that's going to allow heroism deck to have something powerful to run into. So I still believe the Devastators and maybe even the Avenger and maybe even the Relentless are going to see a little bit of play, but I think Krayt Dragon is definitely going to be the big thing that's going to see a lot more play, in my opinion. And I think it's going to be the most expensive legendaries in set one. So if you ever open one, don't trade it for nothing. Either keep it for yourself or really try to pick up something that you really want. It's very difficult to predict exactly how expensive it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be as expensive as Vader in set 1 because Vader in set 1 was really played in all black-green decks, and black-green decks, as you know, was the most popular color combination. So I don't think it's going to be on the same level as a Vader, but expect at least this card to cost around, I would say at least around 30 quid. I would say maybe 25 quid to 30 quid probably would be my estimation, but we'll see. Of course, supply is also another factor as well. Anyway, I hope this video was useful, and if you have disagreement or things that you think also other cards that you think are going to be very expensive, let me know in the comment below. I will be try to answer why I did not include those cards into the list. Um, um, Obviously, every legendary has the potential to be very expensive, but I think there are a lot of legendaries in this set that are not really good, or at least are extremely situational, and I don't think those cards are going to be very expensive, but we'll see. Once again, my coaching schedule is on the comments below if you want to get some coaching. And if you like that video, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.